Good morning. I think it's Tuesday. As I said yesterday, man, my days are getting all mixed up. I'm sure yours are too. Today's Tuesday. It's 8:26 in the morning, and we are getting back to the Gospel of Mark. I'm really enjoying the Gospel of Mark. Part of the reason I'm enjoying this time doing this with you is because I'm using um, I'm using Mark as my own uh, personal devotional, and what I get from that, that's what I come to you and share with you. And so let's look at some of the things that I learned this morning and came up with as we read the Gospel of Mark. First, we're going to read 14, Mark 6:14 through 29. Let's look at 14 through 16 first. King Herod heard about this, for Jesus' name had become well known. Some were saying John the Baptist had been raised from the dead, and that is why miraculous powers are at work in him, work in Jesus. Others said he is Elijah, and still others claimed he is a prophet, like one of the prophets of long ago. But when Herod heard this, he said, John, whom I beheaded, has been raised from the dead. Now, um, we're introduced to King Herod for the first time in the Gospel of Mark here. It says King Herod heard about this. Now, King Herod, it's a neat history about King Herod. Um, Herod the Great was his father. Now, Herod the Great was the ruler over all of what we now call the Holy Land. Okay, but at Herod's death, he had four sons that were given a quarter of each, and they were called a tetrarch. Okay, and so this is actually Herod the Tetrarch and not Herod the King or King Herod. Actually, Herod had um, asked Rome to give him that title several times, and they uh, wouldn't let him have it. And so, but he was commonly known as King Herod, though he was only the king or the ruler, you might say, the tetrarch over Galilee and Perea. In other words, Jerusalem, Judea, and all that had one of his brothers who ruled over it. So the thing is, he wanted to be seen and known as king, but the emperor of Rome wouldn't let him be that way. But some of the people saw him that way. But the thing about it that I read this morning, this is something I never thought about or never heard, was Mark might be using this ironically to say, well, this guy thinks he's king or says he's king, but really, in reality, we know he's not. Anyway, um, it says that King Herod, he heard about Jesus, and we see that some were saying different things about Jesus. Some were saying he was John the Baptist. Some were saying he was Elijah. Some were saying he was one of the old prophets of old, come back to life. Now we'll see when we get to chapter 8, 8 verses 27, Jesus asks his disciples who everybody is saying he is, and they say the same thing. Who do people say that I am? They replied, some say that John the Baptist, others say Elijah, and others say one of the prophets. And that's when Jesus asked them, who do you say I am? And Peter says, you are the Messiah. We'll get to that when we get to chapter 8. So anyway, we see that people are thinking that Jesus are, thinking different things about Jesus because he's got this miraculous powers. He must be one of the prophets or John the Baptist or somebody reincarnated. Okay, so let's go on. It says that Herod thought he was John the Baptist because John or Herod had beheaded John. And now we're going to hear the story about how that happened. All right. So, verse 17. For Herod himself had given orders to have John arrested, and he had him bound and put in prison. He did this because of Herodias, his brother Philip's wife, whom he had married. For John had been saying, uh, to Herod, it is not lawful for you to have your brother's wife. So Herodias nursed a grudge against John and wanted to kill him, but she was not able to because Herod feared John and protected him, knowing him to be a righteous and holy man. When Herod heard John, he was greatly puzzled. Yet he liked to listen to him. This is kind of neat. Um, Herod was not a particularly religious man, okay? But he evidently had some, he didn't want to kill John because, what if John was really sent by God? I don't want God to smite me. I don't want him to come down and take if it really is God, and I'm not a really religious man, but I still believe there's God, and He could do harmful things to me, and I don't want if I harm His prophet, so I'm just going to put him in jail, and maybe that will appease not only my wife, but appease God. Okay, so he's not a religious man necessarily, but he is still worried. Okay, verse 21 through 23. Finally, the opportune time came. On his birthday, Herod gave a banquet for his high officials and military commanders and the leading men of Galilee. When the daughter of Herodias came in and danced, she pleased Herod and his dinner guests. Okay. The king said to the girl, "Ask me for anything you want, and I'll give it to you." And he promised her with an oath, "Whatever you ask, I will give you up to half of my kingdom." Wow, must have been a pretty seductive dance here to have Herod under her spell so much. I mean, she did something that really took him and the rest of the folks and just had them under her spell, because he goes as far as say, "Oh, I'll give you anything I want, anything you want, up to half my kingdom. I'll give you half my kingdom. You just ask me, and I'll give you anything you want." So, anyway, whatever she did, she got his attention and she got him. Okay, 24 and 25. She, Herodias' daughter, she went out and said to her mother, "What shall I ask for?" "The head of John the Baptist," she answered. At once the girl hurried in to the king with the request, "I want you to give me right now the head of John the Baptist on a platter." On a platter. So we see how Herodias, who's been very upset, holding a grudge against John the Baptist for all that he's been doing, all that he had said against them, basically for humiliating her in the public eye, she gets her revenge. Her daughter says, "What should I ask for?" Um, I want you to ask for John the Baptist's head on a platter. I want him dead for everything he's done against me. All right. So let's finish our reading. The king was greatly distressed, hearing the news that he had to kill John the Baptist now. But because of his oaths, because he had made an oath to her and his dinner guest in front of the dinner guest, he did not want to refuse her. So he immediately sent the executioner with orders to bring John's head. The man went, beheaded John the Baptist, and brought back his head on a platter. He presented it to the girl, and she gave it to her mother. On hearing of this, John's disciples came and took his body and laid it in a tomb. Okay. All right. He didn't really, he being Herod didn't really want to do this. He didn't really want to kill John the Baptist. Again, he was still a little bit worried. Plus, he kind of liked going hearing what he had to say. So, he didn't want to kill him, but he had made this oath. He had made this promise before all these men, all these prominent men. And, if he had not kept the oath, it would have shamed him. And in this day, shame and honor meant a great deal. It's one of the most important things you could have. If you were honored, you were looked upon with people greatly, or in a great way. And if you were shamed, you were dishonored, and people looked down upon you. All right. So King Herod, not wanting to be, them look down on him, he had to do it. He had to kill her or have her killed. Okay. She wants his head on a platter. Doesn't just say, "Hey, go kill him." Okay. I want you to bring that head to me. I want to see that head. I want you to prove that he's dead. Have that head, that bloody head, on a platter right here. He gives it to her, and she gives it to her mother, who evidently looks at it and is enjoying this. Wow. We may be desensitized because of TV. We see stuff like this on TV, and, we don't go because, we're used to it. But I don't think any of us, if a bloody head was at our kitchen table, I know I would not want a bloody head at my kitchen table, much less hand one to my wife. Now that's just, that's going too far. But that was the day, that was the time, that was a different time. And so King Herod did exactly what Herodias wanted him to do in the end, had John the Baptist beheaded, had him killed for all the humiliating things that he had done to both Herod, but also especially to Herodias. Herodias got her revenge in the end. Now we see that Herodias is a manipulative woman. She's a selfish woman, and she's an unforgiving woman. Now, these three things fly in the face of Jesus's teachings. These are things that we need to keep in mind, that are things that we need to be just the opposite of. Um, Whereas people in this world will manipulate others to get ahead, must remember that Jesus teaches us humility, to be humble. Where people in this world are selfish and think only about themselves, we must always be thinking about others. Um, do unto others as you would have them do unto you, Jesus says. Love your neighbor. All right. And as there will be many people in this world that will never forgive others, possibly somebody that will never forgive you, we must do as Jesus said and forgive not 7 times, but 77 times. In other words, forgive every time. It's not always easy, it can be very difficult. And sometimes we can't do it on our own. We must have the help of Jesus. We must pray and ask Him to give us this spirit of forgiveness. But the takeaway today is to be just the opposite of Herodias, who was a horrible, horrible woman, um, and be more like Jesus wants us to be. Let us be humble. Let us be um, giving to others. Let us be forgiving. For that is how we want others to be to us. Now they won't always be that way to us, but it's kind of like being or practicing for when we get to heaven. All right, today it's the end for today. I hope you had a good time. I hope you learned something. I know I did this morning. So we'll see you next time. Have a blessed day and be safe.